Good afternoon. Happy New Year. Welcome to our first Lunch and Learn workshop of our series for 2023 spring semester. We're so excited to have you join us. We put these, Dr. McCrary and I, who's going to be our speaker today, actually thought about this about a couple years ago to put these little lunch and learns to give you little opportunities in small settings to talk about research, talk about graduate programs, and things that you may not have the opportunity to do so in a different form. So we hold them one or two through the month at 12 to 1 via Zoom to ensure that we are providing you an opportunity to have a discussion. It is my great pleasure to have Dr. Victor McCrary be with us this afternoon. He's the Vice President of Research at UDC. He is not only a colleague, but he's a friend. So I am really pleased that he has joined us to talk about making the pitch, playing the research game successfully. Dr. McCrary has held executive positions at Johns Hopkins University's Applied Physics Laboratory, Morgan State University, and as the division chief at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. His accomplishments, which I always find fascinating, the more I learn about him, the more I'm fascinated about what he has done. His accomplishments include the development of the first industry-led electronic book standards and an electronic Braille reader. So I think that's just amazing, which led him to be the co-recipient of the U.S. Department of Commerce Gold Medal in 2000. In 2001, he was honored as Scientist of the Year by the annual Black Engineer of the Year Award, BEYA STEM Conference. He received his doctoral degree in chemistry. He's a chemist from Howard University, a master's in engineering from the University of Pennsylvania, and a bachelor's in chemistry from the Catholic University of America. So without further ado, Dr. McCrary, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Reed, and thank you for that introduction. And thank you, everybody, for taking your lunchtime and joining us here to understand making the pitch, playing the research game. And as if you look here, you may say, what do you mean by a game? I write a good proposal and I put it in, but it is a game because what I hope to give you is a few tips on how to navigate that successfully. Because as I tell people, if you put a proposal in, you're not guaranteed for it to be awarded. But if you don't put a proposal in, I can guarantee that it won't. And so I'm going to give you my experience and some tips to help you here. And so let me go. So this is kind of where it comes from. I actually used to teach this to executives back at the University of Pennsylvania of how going from the lab to the executive C-suite. Basically, we're going to talk about relationship management, networking, and things that will make your pitch very good. By the way, this presentation we'll make available on our research website. So also, please feel free to call me. It is better with these hybrid days to actually send me an email. Also, any members of our incredible university research team. So our Director of Responsive Programs, Ms. Laura Lee Davidson, Ms. Cynthia Mohammed, Ms. Salome Amusu, Ms. Kanika Dunson, please contact any of them for any help or questions. This is what the Office of University Research is here for, and we're here to help you. As you develop your proposal, we can provide resources or some insight in such that it will not just become a labor of love, but also a successful proposal. So let me see if this will, as we advance. So let me go here. And one thing I will say is part of making the pitch is kind of how you carry yourself. So I will ask everybody, because when you make a pitch, that pitch may be to an alumnus. It may be to that person across the fence who's your neighbor. It may be to an agency program officer or a philanthropic giver. But whoever you're making that pitch to, you don't know what resources they have. And if they always ask you to follow up, still kind of old school, it's important to have business cards because a lot of times connections are made are just about serendipity. And so you may be on the metro, you may be at church, you may be at a reunion, you may be at a party, and someone hears about your research and says, I'd like to know more. Well, that person might look, who wants to know more might have a connection to funding. So that's why I asked you, do you have your business cards? And if you don't, you can actually get them through our print shop. They make 250 cards, and so it's always good to have. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is, do you know your product? And that is, before you pitch, it's important to know what are some of the accomplishments and what are the things you offer and your institution. And in that case, it is the University of the District of Columbia. What do we offer? Because that's the first thing someone's going to say is, if you're going to say, well, I want to do a thing in climate change, or I have a proposal to look at jazz as it developed in Washington, D.C., or I'm very interested in looking at water purification issues in the Potomac, the first thing they're going to say is, well, what institution are you affiliated with? And you need to be able to say and tick off some profiles, not only of the institution, but some accomplishments. So you notice here, I have 5 different logos. This will be a test, but the question is, what is the correct logo for the University of the District of Columbia? Because if you don't advertise your product correctly, or there is some what they call brand confusion, then it puts doubt in whoever is the potential funder, whether I should fund it, because you don't even have the right logo for the university. Also, as you see, I'm very proud to wear my I love UDC button and my UDC pen. It's extremely important that when you come in and make a pitch, you're extremely enthusiastic. I have my red UDC shirt on. You know, if you come in and say, oh yes, I'm from UDC and I'm interested in getting funded, that conveys non-verbally to the funder. Well, if you're not enthusiastic about the institution that I want to convey funding on, why should I be enthusiastic about giving you a grant? So the one is, know your product. And so what is the product we have? Well, first of all, it's the university identity. So you should be able to know that we are an HBCU. We are an 1862 land grant, not in 1890, 1862, and we're only one of 2 HBCUs. And as a quiz, because I won't tell you, you should know what the other one is. We are the only public university in the district. We have 5 campuses. I challenge you, maybe at the end when you questions, you should know what the 5 campuses are. We have an ABET accredited engineering program. We're an emerging research institution. And we like to say that we're DC's government's research laboratory, whether that is looking at how do we raise the math scores of our students in high school from, for example, looking at algae blooms in the Potomac, to looking, for example, as how do we work with elderly folks in order to keep sure that they have cognitive recognition. Our research strengths, again, these are talking points you should be able to talk about. Manufacturing, biomedical, STEM education, aquaponics, aviation maintenance. Now we have a farm. Now you may say a lot of that is STEM, but also you can add to this. You can talk about what we have done in humanities. You can talk about the DC Jazz Archives. But again, when you're making a pitch, the first thing you ought to be able to say before you pitch your specific proposal, whatever it is this is the identity of UDC. We are one of 15, of only 15 HBCUs that have an ABET accredited engineering program. So again, these are some hallmarks of what we have. I haven't put them all here. The other one is we have a great economic impact on the District of Columbia. So for every dollar that Mayor Bowser and the City Council gives us, we return 4 back. As you can see, about almost $406 million in annual total economic impact to the District of Columbia. Again, extremely important, because in some cases, the person you're pitching to may be a DC agency, and they want to know why should I give and trust you to the money to UDC. And then the other thing is this is a major program of President Mason's and the university, and will continue on and with whoever the new president is developing America's workforce nucleus, DAWN. I will talk about this later, but the biggest thing right now that funders are looking at, even with research proposals, are if you're going to conduct research, whatever it is, how are you developing the workforce, particularly the diverse domestic STEM workforce? How are you getting people out here who can get jobs, particularly both in the city and the surrounding area? So we all know that we have an equity imperative. We have a final report coming out. So you should also say, as part of knowing your product, yes, we have a strategic plan that President Mason started in 2015. And one of those goals was to increase research funding. And you should say, when we looked at the baseline of where we are, this is how we stand with the other universities. You can look at them as competitors within the nation's capital. At the time this was done, back in 2018, we were an MTech 2-class school. Our expenditures was only about 3.7 million. Our Carnegie classification, we moved up from 2015. But what you can now say is, now that you know who we are and you can convey that to the potential funder, you also can now talk about what are your accomplishments. And as you can see, this is the correct logo for the University of the District of Columbia. So where are we now? Well, this is a chart from the HBCU sector view of the 11 R2 HBCUs as of January 2022. I put UDC in there because if you look at our research expenditures as measured by the National Science Foundation Higher Education Research and Development Survey, our research expenditures have at least almost doubled, tripled from what they were in 2018. So we're at 8.1 million. That puts us in good company with people like the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, Texas Southern, and Clark Atlanta, okay? As well as if you look across, you know, we are increasing our research expenditures. So that's a good thing that UDC, one thing you say is we are an emerging research institution on the road to R2 by 2024. Now, whether we get there or not is not important, but working toward that is extremely important to have that goal and to articulate that to a potential funder. Also, you can see our sponsored program and number of proposals have gone up since 2018. That is, again, an accomplishment. So you can tell folks, yes, you know, in 2021, we had 54 million in proposals that were submitted by our faculty and over 33 million in awards. This is extremely important numbers to talk about, and that these things show that UDC is an emerging research institution. Now, you may stop for a moment. Why do you keep stressing that, Dr. McCrary? Well, because this issue of R2 and Carnegie classification is important when a funder considers you for research funding or any award, because it's like a good housekeeping seal of approval. Oh, well, you've got this classification. You're seen as this. Then that makes them say, I think you have the capability of doing the research. Now, I know some people will say, well, there's probably some stereotypes and some bias in that. Yeah, it is, but this is why it's called the game. I'm trying to give you the tips that we have learned, our collective team in the Office of University Research, to help you be able to traverse this maze so that you have the highest probability of getting a research award. And so another accomplishment is we've built a good Department of Defense portfolio. You may ask, why am I focusing on the Department of Defense? Because right now the national trend is we are in global competition. And so it's extremely important to work in terms of relationships with the Department of Defense, as well as we have a large number of students who are being employed. If you think about the Washington greater metropolitan region, besides cherry blossoms and tourism, the biggest business that we have here is national security. So the federal government, Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, and all of the defense contractors like Boeing, Northrop Grumman, who are around this area. So it's important to have these relationships because many of our students do internships and go on to work there. We also get funding from them. For example, from Arliss UMD, we've gotten close to $1 million that have gone to UDC to conduct research. This is, again, working with Navy, NSA, Army. Part of those things you can talk about and people will listen up is that we are sending our students there, or we have developed MOUs and agreements with these folks to develop curriculum so that our students could go out and get jobs as well as do research of interest to the Department of Defense. Also, our faculty have been recognized for also now, this is October 21, but I can say up to now, October 22, we've had faculty members who've been recognized as women of color for 4 years in a row straight. This is Dr. Freddie Dixon, who was one of our latest honorees, as well as Dr. Ahora. She was just recognized last year in the School of Business. This is a great thing to talk about. This is kind of how you, as you building your pitch, you can mention these type of accomplishments. Dr. Talesa DeKissa was honored at the Black Engineer of the War for outstanding research. That's a good thing to talk about because that will help sell you when you can talk about the accomplishments of UDC. And then Dr. Thompson, we were the first HBCU ever in NSF's history of the Allen T. Waterman Award to get this grant. It's $1 million, and it's a point of pride for UDC. Again, bringing these things to the attention of your potential funder as you start to make the pitch obviously strengthens your position, because then they can say, well, Professor Joan or Professor Joe, there's no issue here. The university is supportive of research. They have scholars. Yes, it is worth us, our agency, to place a bet. And that's what they're doing with the award. Also, yours truly got reappointed by President Biden to the Science Board. So UDC is in the news as not only a teaching university, but a research university. You can talk about our research day. First one, thank you, Dr. Potter and his team for helping us kick this off, was in 2021, had over 600 participants. We had the director of the National Science Foundation. We had the program manager for the Minority University program for NASA be as speakers. We unveiled our first patent. So you can also talk about when people say, because people are very interested in saying, well, universities get research, but how are they translating it? And that's a key word nowadays, translation of research into commercial activity or societal good. You can say we've had our first provisional patent, and now we have upwards of something like 14 provisional patents we have done. You know, we had our second research day. Again, same number of participants. You can talk about how we feature the research from all of the schools, the 6 schools that we have here at UDC. And then even our president has served on panels talking about the lessons and the value of minority serving institutions. So I put all of this out. And again, I will make these slides available to Dr. Reed, who can make them available to you. But now, you know, as I go into the mechanics of the pitch, it's really important you know these things up front. So let's stop for a minute. You know what the right logo is. You know what UDC is. A lot of people, you know, you may have heard about a year ago, Mackenzie Scott, who was giving a lot of money. This was the former wife of Jeff Bezos of Amazon, was giving a lot of money to HBCUs. Some HBCUs didn't get it, and particularly UDC, is because they didn't know we were an HBCU. I can't tell you how many funding agencies said, oh my God, I didn't know you were HBCU. We have this pot of money over here that's reserved for you. So it's extremely important you understand the identity and history of our institution. It's extremely important that you are very proud when you make that pitch of our institution. Because, for example, in many proposals, they will ask, okay, if you are proposing this, what is your history in this area? And even if you're groundbreaking, they're going to want to know, well, what is your history of research? What are some of the hallmarks of UDC that make you worthy of receiving research funding? And then that's why these accomplishments and understanding our university, who we serve, our enrollment, the number of campuses we have, and even including any famous alums is extremely important. So now let's go on to the nuts and bolts. How do you developing your story? And really, I show this picture of the bridge because what you're trying to do is bridge your story and resonate what your proposal is saying, because your proposal is a story, to the program officer and what is his or her solicitation. Because if your story matches their solicitation, then you have a high probability of being awarded. So how do the grants work? They start with an idea, okay? But it's not your idea. It's an idea that is attracted to the funder. That's why it's important to really read the solicitation and sometimes read it 2 or 3 times, because I'm not going to go through this slide in detail. You can see the steps. But the most important thing is you want that funder, when they read your proposal, because they got to read a lot, but in the executive summary, in the first 1 or 2 pages, when they're reading it over the weekend, they're going to say, yes, that's it. That hits the solicitation I want. They don't want to see a lot of jargon. They don't want to hear about how you got A's in grade school and all of that. They want to know right up front in the executive summary, and when you write it in the first 2 pages, they can say, yes, this addresses the solicitation that I'm putting out. So, I mean, and that's why also, if you have a good idea, the next step is finding someone who will fund it, okay? Because you might have a great idea on making orange juice, but you have to find people who want to do orange juice. And if there are not anybody who does orange juice, but they say apple juice, you might want to say, okay, how do I change my idea to make apple juice? Now, one of the things, and Cynthia Mohammed is on the line here, but I say please follow up with her by email, is we have a service called Pivot, which will put out notifications to you tailored to your research interest. And so instead of having to go to research.gov, grants.gov, and looking at all the solicitations and trying to find out and put in, for example, your keywords, this makes a much more targeted approach. And if you do that and get registered in the Pivot, then those solicitations will come out to your interest. Once those happen, it's obviously building a concept, selling the concept, because that's the most important, and then obviously getting the award. Now, I'm not going to talk about post-award, because right now I think most of your interest is the pre-award. The post-award, in some sense, we can talk more, because now he's talking about how do you deliver. But it's about trying to get the grants award. And, you know, it's to be competitive, you got to have some excitement in the proposal, because I'm excited about giving this talk right now. But unfortunately, most program officers, what they want is to see the written proposal. I can get in bunch, and I can tell you, I could probably sell the university and sell our faculty. But unfortunately, that's not how the game is. So when you send your proposal in, it's got to be exciting. The words have to jump off. And I suggest what you do, and we offer this in the Office of University Research, we have people that we have contracted that can review your proposal. As well as I say, send it to your colleagues and others, because they can help you get excited about it. And I will say this, and that's why we say at least a minimum, contact us 30 days before you submit, because you really need to work that idea. You really need to let other people see it. Are they excited? Is there something you're missing? Because we can't read every proposal. We can maybe get a contract a few people, but it's up to you to work on that. And in some cases, we will tell you, don't go after the solicitation that you're going after because you see it 2 weeks from now. It might be best to wait 4 or 5 months before you have a solid idea that gets funded. And we have good examples of that around the university, of people who have had put in solid proposals and have gotten funded. Dr. Chiagi in engineering has done well. Dr. Flowers in arts and sciences has done very, very well. Those people are putting in solid proposals. Dr. Dixon has a history of getting proposals in. You know, Dean Hamilton and her team, everybody across. But what I'm saying, and be able to do this, the reason they have been successful is they read that solicitation, they have an idea, and the excitement, as you can see at the bottom, jumps off the page. The other thing is you've got to define why your idea is the best idea over anybody else's. So again, if the solicitation says, we want you to make apple juice, why is your way of making apple juice better than what any other body is out there? And so it's important for you to know what the state of the practice is and being able to say, my idea is revolutionary, not evolutionary, because funders are not going to fund incremental innovation. So if all you say is, I'm going to pick more apples to make more juice, that's not enough. But if you could say, I can make more apple juice with less apples by a more efficient process, aha, that's revolutionary. You fill a gap because now you can make more juice with the same amount of apples because you have less waste, because you've come up with an innovative process. So it's also good in your proposal to articulate what are the gaps in what you're proposing. What is the state of the practice? Because you should be the subject matter expert. You should be able to say, this is the best, and this is how I'm going to go farther than what the state of the practice is. So that takes some time and for you to do some research, okay? Because remember, for the solicitation that you're applying for, everybody else is applying. So how does your idea stand out? How do you differentiate yourself? So coupled with, say your institution is an HBCU, our institution is a land grant, okay, we've done these accomplishments. Now it really helps when they look at your proposal, aha, this is why my idea is better. And that stands out in front of reviewers because review processes are subjective, just like employee evaluation. They're the two most subjective things I've ever seen. And what one reviewer may say, oh my God, this is the greatest idea since sliced bread. The other will say, hey, I've seen this before, it's ho-hum. So that's why it's extremely important, that excitement, and then you say, what is the gap? And then the final thing is, if I solve this problem, if I'm funded and I can do this research, this is the impact it will have on the field or in society. And right now the trend line is on society. So my God, I can make more apple juice. It will be cheaper and obviously be more affordable to the greater part of society. So you, again, your idea, what is the gap? And my God, how does it impact the world, or the state of what we're doing? Okay, that is the most important thing. Not the fact that it will make more publications that you'll have out there or that you'll get a Nobel Prize. Those are secondary considerations. Funders nowadays, the trend is, oh my God, are you making a societal impact? Is it a broad impact? Okay, and it doesn't help position your community, your state, or the nation. So with that, before you make the pitch, here's a checklist. Identify the agency and the PM, program manager or program officer. It may even be important because when they put solicitations out, to contact them, ask them questions. They're more than happy, particularly by email. But even before that, if you have an idea, even though there's no solicitation and you want to find out who's interested, talk with us in the Office of University Research and we can direct you to some people because it's important to engage that conversation. What do you have to offer? What have they funded in the past? It may be an interest that your thing might be a different take on some broad area they're in. You ought to look at their bio, find out where their interests are. Are there areas of commonality? Because as you know, from a social engineering point of view, if there's areas of commonality, there's a likelihood that there's an overlap. Is your bio sketch up to date? And we will be sending out in the next 2 weeks. NSF and NIH has asked for new guidelines to update your biosketch because let's face it, they're going to look and see your biosketch. If it's not there, that hurts you. And have you made quad charts? And we'll show those in a minute. I guess what I'm saying is, how do you, by doing these things, you increase the probability because the person gets to know you. I mean, for example, one thing I haven't talked about is LinkedIn. Because many program managers, particularly since the pandemic, they don't go out and travel. How do they get to know you? Well, they're going to look you up on LinkedIn. Okay, they're going to look you up on Google Scholar. So the more that that information is up to date, it makes you less of an unknown and less of a risk when the program officer funds you. Because what they want to be able to say is, at the end of the day, I funded Dr. Reed. She has the right credentials. She has done these things in the past, and she's got a revolutionary idea. And so this is the Hellmeyer criteria. This is George Hellmeyer, was one of the first directors of DARPA. And I highlight in blue, a great proposal has no jargon. It doesn't get caught up. This is not a technical paper. You should be able, as someone told me, my grandmother, who doesn't have to know the first thing about my field, should understand it and say, aha. And then the question is, who cares? And then in your proposal, there should be milestones, what we call midterms and final exams, to check for success. So I just showed one. This is a quad chart. If you're trying to pitch, particularly if you have to go to a program officer or you're on Zoom, they don't want to see 35 slides. This is an old DoD thing that people still use now, even in NSF. Show me in one slide. What are your project goals? What are your framework? You know, this is, for example, maybe past support. What are your accomplishments that you've done in the past or you hope to accomplish? And then obviously a pictorial narrative. Same thing here. And so we can help you with that, to give you these tools, again, to sell it. Again, you know, if you have a chance to meet with a program officer or program manager, probably over a Zoom, you're going to only probably get 30 minutes. They're going to want you to get right to the point. Quad charts do that because they don't want to see 10 slides or 15 slides. They maybe want to see 2 or 3, and they want your narrative pointed. I will offer this as the Office of University Research and a former program officer. I will tell you, I remember I had to make recommendations on funding. And I can tell you this, if I had 2 proposals and they're both technically were the same, and they asked for the same amount of money, and Professor A was somebody who had talked to me beforehand, asked me broadly about the solicitation, and Professor B had not, and it's 5:30 at night, and I have to reach my daughter's 6 o'clock soccer game, guess who's getting funded? That's how subjective these things are. So you got to be laser focused. So one of the things I will offer to you is we will do a pitch clinic in the spring, as well as you're more than happy to come to me and say, Dr. McCrary, I'd like to pitch you an idea or show you some slides. Does this make sense? As well as we have people in our network that can help you. Because if you can't sell it to me, I doubt if you can sell it to a program officer in any agency, okay? So that's why it's really important. We are here to help you be successful. So some people use logic models, and the most important a logic model is actually work from the back to the resources. What is it, the impact that you're going to do, and the results and the activities, and then how much money you need. This is kind of like putting budgets together. But more importantly, you got to think, I don't need $500,000 just to do this. You want to say, I need $500,000 to do this, and this is how I'm going to measure it, and this is how it's going to change the world. So you might want to start at the front. How are you going to change the world, and work backwards to okay, what are my activities, and then what are our resources? So if I'm going to make apple juice that is at a low cost, that is affordable to every family, particularly families who are economically challenged, how I might work backwards and how I'm going to make that dream come true. That will help you structure how you put your proposal together. Because it's not enough, it helps to say you're an HBCU and we're in 1890, but it's not enough because there's a lot of other HBCUs and land-grant institutions competing. Yours, again, has to be compelling. It has to be exciting. It has to jump off the page. So this is some other things about just looking at the solicitation, making sure you're capturing words that's in the solicitation in your proposal. I can't tell you how many proposals were not funded because the person didn't read the solicitation and answer the questions that were in the solicitation, okay? Or did they put words? a good tool is just to use an Excel spreadsheet and say, this is what the solicitation has asked for. These are keywords. And then have I answered these questions in my proposal? And I've used these keywords, because that's how your proposal gets knocked out. So for example, the proposal says apple juice, production of apple juice, methods for doing it, cost, and you don't mention apple juice at all. Guess what? I don't think your proposal is going to be funded. It doesn't matter that your PhD came from Harvard. It doesn't matter that you got all A's in 3rd grade. It matters from the program officer's perspective. And then this is just grant competitiveness. So again, your qualifications, relationships. I would say right now, look at your LinkedIn profile. Is it up to date? And have you included things? Are you, making sure people who are going to make a bet on you, because that's what it is, an investment, that they can ensure that you're pretty good at what you're going to be able to do. And that includes also putting together checklists, and we can help you with that in the Office of University Research. Again, allow time for derailments. Plan to submit. Don't try to put a proposal together the week before a deadline, because everybody will know that it's a rush job and it won't look good. Don't put a proposal that you toss them from somewhere else, because every program office does a plagiarism check. They have software. So if you do that, not a good thing. Work at least 8 weeks minimum ahead of time to put something together. And so, because they can tell if it's a rush job, because if I can tell it's a rush job, they can tell it's a rush job and it won't get funded. And so again, talked about reading the announcement. Big thing, are you creating a diverse domestic-based talent pool? Because part of a lot of funding like NSF and other agencies, not only are they looking for the research, but are you training the next generation of students that are going to be out there? So remember, good ideas are not funded, good proposals. You can write a good idea, but if you're not putting a good proposal in, it's a proposal, okay? So if you're going to talk about curing cancer, sounds like a great idea. But if you don't have a proposal that is credible enough to show how you're going to do that and be able to show what are the results, how do we know if we're on the right track, and what's the impact, that proposal is going to go into the do not fund pile. I just want to show here's some trends these days in proposals, and then we'll have time for questions that you could put in your proposal that are key things you should know about. So the President Biden just signed the CHIPS Act. This is about bringing manufacturing and competitive technologies back to the United States. We're looking at broadening the pool, and it's really targeting for emerging research and research-intensive HBCUs, of which UDC is one. Talk about it. That's one of the things. If you can talk about how it makes us more competitive, how this helps bring certain technologies to bear, and how this underpins certain industry, is one trend you ought to be aware of. The next trend is the missing millions. Right now, we don't have everybody we should have in the workforce. If you look to population parity, we're not there in terms of Latinos and Black Americans and Indigenous Americans in STEM. If your proposals can talk about how you're making more domestic STEM, increasing that workforce in those areas and exposing them, this is a trend that's happening right now that the proposers will help your proposal get funded if you can address that in your proposal. And then national security. Are you putting out enough domestic students, and are the areas you're at addressing national security trends? Again, this is another important trend that's going on right now in the funding agencies. And if you can talk about that, how this is not only important for research, but economic development and national security. By the way, I just recited the mission of NSF. Those type of wording in your proposal is something that will get you by. And then if you're talking about, particularly folks in the community college or workforce development, of how you're creating not only people with degrees, but those people in the trades, people who don't have degrees, but are extremely important to our science and engineering enterprise. How are you making more electricians, plumbers, healthcare IT people? These things are extremely important, another new trend. And so UDC also, if the final thing is a force for good. We're not doing research just to get more money, because you don't make money off research. But what we're doing it is because as a land grant, our responsibility is to help the citizens of the District of Columbia and surrounding areas. And that's what we're here to do. How do we help them? How do we go from bench to benefits? You can use that term in your proposals. So if your proposals have this character and shape like that, this is extremely important in making a successful proposal. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Dr.
I'll stop sharing my slides.
I want to tell you before people jump in, this was an amazing presentation. I've learned every time you talk, I learn more and more about, the research arm of UDC. And I guess a couple things that stood out for me was the word revolutionary. And again, so if I have an idea and I'm a faculty member, you may have said this, I just want to reinforce it. If I have some ideas, because you said ideas don't get funded, good proposals do. Can I come to your shop and bounce off some ideas that I could clearly may not have, articulated it well enough to put a proposal together, but, just bounce off some ideas to then make it more palatable to be put into a proposal, I should say.
Yes, Dr. Reed, we are more than welcome. You can come. I'll even say this, and this is not a requirement, but hey, let's make a lunch thing. We could go to the Vietnamese restaurant and you can tease out some of your ideas, because the other thing you want to also make sure, and that's why I say you want to do the good, when you do the good research, you don't want to put a proposal in to say, I have a proposal for a new thing called the internal combustion engine, because then someone will come back and say, and you'll say, you know why? Because that will replace buggy whips. That's a great idea. Unfortunately, that's an idea that's 100 years old that's already come to pass. So it's extremely important, and I'm glad you raised this, Dr. Reed. You need to know, that's why I say you need to know what the state of the practice is. You may have a good idea, but it's already may have been done, okay? And so you wouldn't want to embarrass yourself by submitting a proposal, and then someone comes back and says, Dr. McCrary, that's great. We think it's great that you want to build a diesel engine and all of this, but you know what? That was already done by Otto Diesel in 1904, and it's already been commercially put out there. Now, on the other hand, if you say, I've got an idea for a revolutionary type of engine that could be use renewable energy and is much more efficient than current things out here. Now, that's a good idea, okay? Now, I wouldn't say a more efficient internal combustion engine, because the trend is we're trying to move away from fossil fuels. But if you say, I got a new idea for lithium batteries to replace lithium battery storage, because right now Teslas are catching fire, lithium batteries only have so much capacity and efficiency, and this would revolutionize and move us forward faster to renewable energy and cleaner fossil fuels. Aha! Now that is a good idea.
Okay. Good, thank you. And I also want to just kind of piggyback the slides on define the impact. I think when you did the logic model from impact all the way to resources, I think people sometimes don't think about that, and the way you listed the ideas. So I thought that was really, really good. And also you talked about the LinkedIn profile. So would you recommend that if I have an idea that I'm kind of tossing it out, should I actually put something like that on my LinkedIn profile, or should it be a fait accompli before I put it out on my LinkedIn profile about my research ideas?
So on your LinkedIn profile, I wouldn't put your research ideas, because that's just an profile. It's almost like a de facto biosketch, even though NSF has a format. Let's tell you, program officers, and that's why we at UDC have upgraded our webpage, and thanks to Cynthia Mohammed, who's on this call, who's led that for research, is because program officers have little money, they're not going to travel. So everything they're going to get is right here in front of their screen. So if Dr. Reed puts up, put a proposal, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to look at her biosketch, but they're also going to look at her LinkedIn profile, because they're going to say, okay, what institutions was she at before? What kind of awards and things like that? However, what I would do in LinkedIn, LinkedIn has a feature where you can post. And I would post, maybe because you don't want to give away your idea, but post about, hey, I've got this new thing about this. Because one thing is, you might want to have collaborators, or someone might want to collaborate with you, okay, in another institution, and you can both put in a joint proposal. So the other thing is kind of posting and some marketing communications. Now, granted, you don't want to tell your shop secrets on LinkedIn because somebody else will take it and then you have nothing. And that's why, the way also we have a technology commercialization service. So if you have an idea that you want to get an intellectual property disclosure, come see me. We've actually put out UDC, we put out our first patents. And so it is important for you from a LinkedIn point of view, if a program officer goes to see you, they can say, oh yes, this person does have a degree, because this is the George Santos area where people are looking at credibility and things like that. So they want to make sure you're real. And then from that adds more confidence, because again, the program officer wants to be able to say, I made my best investments. That doesn't mean that at the end of the period of performance, people can say, oh, well, this thing didn't work out, because it's research. Not everything is 100%. If you get 2 to 4 that work, wow, you had a great day. But they do want to make sure that Dr. Reed has her degrees. Okay, Dr. Reed has been in this area, may have had a few awards, and a lot of people chat and say, yeah, I like Dr. Reed. She's great in nanotechnology. So that's important.
All right, so I'm going to open it up. Thank you for that. I'm going to open it up to other questions. I do have a couple more, but I'll open it up to the participants. Would you like to ask Dr. McCrary any questions or make comments on what you saw in the slides?
Please, not all at once.
Okay, well, since I don't see any hands or are unmuting themselves. You talked about the pitch clinic. Can you share more with us about what that is and when we may possibly see any advertisements, and who is it open to?
So this is something that just came up this morning. And I'm going to be working with Dr. Sutton in Title III. But one of the things we may do is Miss Davison in her previous position used to work for an organization that would offer like a 1 or 2 day thing offsite. And how do you make the pitch, as well as how do you do post-award grant management? So one of the things we're thinking about is a clinic where we get all faculty together for a day, maybe even overnight, talk about it, have you come do your pitches, bring in other faculty from other institutions, and make you feel comfortable. Because let me tell you this, I have 5 great presidents, and one of them is Barack Obama. And the reason why he's a great president, besides that he did the Affordable Health Act, was the fact that he became president when my aunts and when I was growing up, people would say, oh, there'll never be a Black president, it'll be 200 years. But by him having that, my I can say to my daughter and my son, if they ask me, can a person of color or can an African-American be president? I can say, yes, you can. The reason with UDC, you can see those accomplishments from Dr. Dixon and Dr. DeKissa and Dr. Thompson is, yes, you can. Just because we are an historically Black college or university doesn't mean we have any research prowess, or does that mean that we are mediocre? By no means. We are, I think we are growing to become a premier research institution. So if you feel that and you know that, then the only question is, don't think of your idea as stupid, or don't think if you get a grant that they made it to the wrong person, that's an imposter complex. You can go out there and do it. But if you don't ask for help, which I think Dr. Reed is asking you to ask now, I can't help you.
Have a couple more. All right. So as a part of putting together a proposal, there are common information that is required in, basically all grants, information about the institution. Do we have a boilerplate template that has some of the information that's required for proposals that I don't have to go and look for it, but I can only just pull down the template and ensure that I have the most accurate and up-to-date information about the university that's required.
We do. We have that on our website. We have a routing form, but I see Ms. Mohammed is here so she can give you the latest. And Cynthia, do you mind giving everyone the latest update on that question?
Yes. I guess I needed some clarity when they say the guidelines.
I think what they're asking for, and so I'll say, I'll speak for Dr. Reed. There might be information like UEI numbers, okay? There might be other entity information as well as other things that are needed. Do we have that information? I know we have some of that is readily available.
Yes, yeah, we have a document that needs to be updated on our website, but it has all of the general information for the institution that you would put into your grant application. But as far as the guidelines of what's needed in a proposal, each funding agency produces their own guidelines. So NSF would have a guidelines that is very detailed of what they want their bio sketches to look like, what they want it to contain, not to contain. NIH has the same, and they all detail what they want. And so when you put a grant application together, you have to use those guidelines of how you submit the application. The only exception is that if your program announcement says they want the bio sketch formatted differently, or they don't want the current and pending support, then you have to follow what the program announcement says. Other than that, it's not a checklist because they detail everything so there's clarity. We don't expect people to read the entire book, but if you're putting together a bio sketch, I would suggest for that funder that you would read that section so you understand what's needed for you for that application. And as you move on to other agencies, read the sections that pertain to your grant application to make sure that you're in harmony with what the sponsor is looking for.
Thank you,
And
Cynthia.
I guess just in addition to that, I was thinking more of the UDC information. Like, I don't know, again, is it like the history of the university? Is that something that they ask for, or something that's standard UDC information that's required, that we would have a template so that I know I have the most current information versus, you know, finding something on the website that's, you know, 10 years old?
Well, if you're looking, for example, like UDC history and what we've done, they recently have posted that under the president's accomplishments.
Okay.
So I would use that. That's not more in the cover sheet of the proposal or anything,
Okay.
but I said I'll make these slides available, but it's important to have that. Now, for each of your schools, they have done also on their websites some things of what they've done, what is their purpose, and what is their vision.
Okay.
That should be consistent in your proposals, what's on the website. So if the website, like Causes, has done a very good website that talks about their food hubs throughout the city, what their land grant status is and how they work, you should be able to copy that verbatim in your proposal, okay? And make sure you have that information. For example, if you're putting a proposal in to USDA, so that they understand that. Because again, do not assume that the program officer or program manager knows everything about your institution, okay? But also you don't want to give them too much. What I'm saying is don't write 5 pages about UDC and before they get to your idea, okay? Otherwise, that'll turn them off.
All right, again, I'm going to open it up to questions. We got about 1 more minute. All right, I just want to say thank you, Dr. McCrary, Ms. Mohammed, for sharing this information with us. Again, I think it's invaluable that we have these type of conversations where if you do have questions, you can, you know, it's very intimate and personal that you can actually get them answered. But again, I want to thank everyone for participating. I think it's important that our community is available for you to be able to provide whatever you need. So I want to say thank you. And this recording will be available on the C.A.L's website, also on the research website. So you will be able to have it. I will make sure I send you, the people who are attending, the slides that are a part of that, but the actual recording, which has the slides in it, will be available. So again, I want to say thank you for joining us for our first Lunch and Learn. Look at the schedule under the Center for Advancement of Learning, and it will let you know when our next workshops are, which will be on, I think, February 28th. We're going to be having Dr. Rankin.
Yep, that's correct.
Dr. Rankin talk about how to do NSF proposals, which is really very important for UDC, and we've been super successful in actually getting some funded. It's 1 o'clock. I want to say thank you and have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thank you, and thank you all for attending. I appreciate your time.